On August 6, the Financial Inclusion Committee, chaired by Gay Santos with on Director EJ Hayansen, conducted a SME forum at the Fairmont in collaboration with Water.org. And on August 6, also the same day, the Ethics Committee, led by Chair Wilma Miranda and Liaison Director Flor Tariela, hosted its first webinar this year entitled Ethics Chasing Technology with Attorney Edsel Tupas, Senior Partner of Gorizeta Law, speaker. Finex has signed several relevant statements of this past quarter. We signed a statement of support for the BIR as well as Commissioner June Lumagi on its 1st anniversary, the unveiling of logo, and the initiatives of BIR to modernize its structure and improve frontline services. We also co-signed together with the MAP, IC, and PCCI on the SEC's draft memorandum circular on the sustainability form. Lastly, co-signed a statement of support for the Department of Energy under the leadership of Secretary Paul Lutilla. For the rest of this year, look forward to the following programs. Our Ayala Finex Finance with the theme of the role of AI in finance and sustainable growth will be held on September 18 at this hotel. This annual conference is sponsored by Ayala Corporation, supported by PNA Grant Thornton, and spearheaded by our Development Committee led by co-chairs Paulo Azurin and Mai Bisna and Liaison Director Gemma Chen. The annual Phoenix Week will run from September 30 to October 4. Our Phoenix Week committee by co-chairs Kai Reyes, Riza Latorre, with Liaison Director Mignon Ramos, putting together a world-class week-long conference with relevant topics and high-caliber speakers. The opening day on 30 will be held in this with the culmination on October 4 at the Shangri-La at the Fort. More details about the Phoenix Week soon. I'd like to thank the sponsors who have already pledged their support, and I encourage everyone to attend this annual and help us through sponsorship. Last June 24, we launched the 80th ING Phoenix CFO year. The deadline for nomination is the end of this month. I invite everyone to nominate their CFO for this much coveted award, the and only award for CFOs country given by their peers. The awarding ceremony will be held on November 15, 6 p.m. at Shangri-La at the Fort. My gratitude to ING for the continued partnership and to our CFO of the Year Awards Committee led by Chairman Brian Trias, Vice Chair Attorney Everly, and Liaison Director Flor Tariela. I also encourage everyone to support the initiatives of the Phoenix Research and Development Foundation and the Phoenix Academy. Our Phoenix Academy regularly offers capital markets and income courses and the finance leadership programs. The first of the digital transformation program, business and finance professionals will be ready before the end of the year. The Phoenix Foundation Social Involvement Committee can provide free financial literacy to all our stakeholders. We hope one can join this advocacy by being one of our lecturer partners. Other programs of the foundation this year include the Finance Educators Training Program in partnership with the Capital Markets Development Foundation Incorporated, the Outstanding Finance Educators with Deloitte Philippines, the Collegiate Finance Competition with JP Chase, among others. We are still campaigning for this year-round sponsorship, and we hope you and your companies will be one of them. We're close to hitting our high ever raised, but at this point, I would like to my sincerest gratitude to the organizations for confirming this support this year. These companies will be flat on the screen. Platinum sponsors, our diamond sponsor or diamond sponsor, gold sponsors, our patrons, and our minor sponsors. This campaign allows us to out our numerous programs and advocacies for the year and into the future. Apart from this, we also encourage everyone to recruit new members, especially from the publicly listed companies, top 1,000 corporations, as well as our SME. I encourage all of you to invite your friends and colleagues to join Phoenix this year. We will continue to keep you informed of planned initiatives, particularly as we progress on our major thrusts for this year. Look forward to your continuing support and engagement. Thank you, and I hope you will find today's general membership meeting meaningful and enjoyable.
Okay. Thank you, President Toti. Events and activities to look forward to. At this point, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our past presidents. We have here today, Mr. Ronnie Alcantara, 2011. Good morning, sir. We also have here Mr. George, 2015. Good morning. Miss Judith Lopez, 2013. Good morning. Good morning. And we have Miss Marivic Españo, 2018. Good morning. In relation to the activities mentioned by President, please allow me to call on Ms. Kai Reyes, co-chair of the Phoenix Week Committee, to an update on what we can expect. Round of applause for Ms. Kai.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Kai Reyes, co-chair of the Phoenix Week, alongside Risa Lato and Migs Ramos. So on behalf of the Phoenix Week Committee, we are thrilled to present this year's 2024 Phoenix Conference. We have an exciting week conference lined up from September 3rd to October 4th, 2024, as mentioned by President Toti. Our theme this year is Empower Progress, Inspire Change, the transformational growth through sustainability, diversity, and digitalization. The conference aims to inspire meaningful change and establish a united call to action from both the private and sectors. Let me give you a brief overview of the 5-day event. Day 1 will be here at Fairmont Makati. The theme Day 1 is Global Perspectives on Sustainability, Diversity, and Digitalization. Honored to have the British Ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Lori Bowfields, open the ceremony. Following her will be a panel discussion featuring from the Philippine energy sector, including Vince Perez and John. For Day 2, hybrid event co-sponsored by the Good Governance and Environment Committee. Our theme is Climate Risks and Opportunity, Building Climate Resilience. We're privileged to have Mr. Benji as our keynote speaker, joined industry leaders Paco Magsaysay, Rudy Ramin, and Ando Malya. Day 3 is our virtual event sponsored by J Phoenix, YF Women in Finance. The theme, Navigating Generational Gaps Towards Transformational Growth. This day will be led by Mr. Ramon and Daniel Rosario. We are also waiting a number of confirmations as well for this event. For Day 4, a hybrid event at this lab at Asian Institute of Management, co-sponsored by the PD and Ethics Committee, the focus on practical applications of AI to achieve Philippine development goals. Our keynote speaker will be Dr. Christopher Monterola, with a panel featuring Ernie Edsel Tupas and Ray Lugtu. Day 5 will be a full on-site event at Shangri-La at the 4th. Our theme is Empower Progress and Inspire Change. The day will be headlined by our esteemed keynote speaker, Mr. Jaime Augusto de Ayala, and will be shift global perspectives discussed on Day 1 to a deep dive into the Philippine perspective on sustainability, diversity, and digitalization. We've highlighted the following critical sectors with figures both public and private institutions: health, agriculture, food, education, technology, infrastructure. We have also invited stars from Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, and DICT, alongside our esteemed co-leads leading the sectors. We'll, of course, conclude the week with a much-anticipated Phoenix Night. To your support and participation. Please note that we are still accepting sponsor for this year's conference. Afternoon and magandang hapon sa
Ms. Kai. So good morning again, everybody. Part of my task is to take a selfie with everyone. So I hope you don't mind. I'll be here. I'm doing they call it the Gen Z selfie, right? I can even do it. I'm not a Gen Z. So let's see if we can pull this together as the non-Gen Zs of this world. How do I do it? No. 0.5. Okay. If I can ask everybody to please stand and maybe compress a bit. Wish me luck. This might take 2 hours, so we'll see. Okay. Here. So, selfie. 1, 2. One more. 1, 2. Okay. So, that's just my face. Really literal, my own selfie. You can take your seat. Okay, so before we go to the other part of the program, yeah, happy to share that we have a lot of insights for you today. So if you've seen, we have a time zone exhibit outside. So we're giving away time zone certificates for 10 lucky winners worth 1,000 each. So not bad, right? At our we can go to time zone, maybe. But that's already pre-drawn. We'll announce later the winners of our seats from time zone. And so anytime you may go outside, they have the spin for time zone. The others are, I was hoping there's massage or haircut, but there's none. Their keychain, hand load, fan, phone hold, and there's actually a mystery prize. I asked what it is. They didn't answer me, so it's really mysterious. See what the prize is. Lastly, we are giving away 5 books authored by Rufo Mendoza entitled Under Sustainability in Business. So we'll also be announcing the winners of the 5 books later today. Okay, so a lot of outside. At this part of the program, please help welcome our new leader. So please may I call on Ms. Larry Concepcion, the chairman of the subcommittee for orientation to introduce our new members. Applause for Ms. Larry.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to welcome our 4 new members this month. As I call you, kindly bring along your sponsors to stand behind. Okay, for the first one, RJ Angeles, Managing Director, Founder, and Philippine Manager, Bayfront Capital Advisors, PTE Limited. Sponsor, Paolo Azurin. Okay, the next one is Tristan Jan de Guzman, Chief Officer, Ayala Logistics Holdings Corporation. Sir Maria Luisa. Okay, the next one. Claudine P. Paz, Chief Finance Officer, More Power Electric Corporation. Sponsor, Wilson P. Tan. President Wilson. Okay, the last list. Mary Chris Panganiban, Landco Corporation. Sponsor, Pia Socorro Go Broxo. Here. Okay, to add so many to this event, may I ask everyone to please stand up and call on President Totti to administer the oath of membership. Thank you.
To our incoming members, please raise your right and join me in the oath of member. I state your name. Been accepted as a member of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines. Do hereby solemnly swear that I will discharge to the best of my ability my duties and responsibilities in pursuit of its goals and objectives. That I will respect and uphold its constitution and bylaws. That I will abide by its code of ethics. That I will observe the highest professional and ethical standards. And that I voluntarily impose this obligation upon myself without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God.
Well, thanks again, President Lee and Miss Larry, and to new members, welcome. We look forward to seeing more of your participation, and we hope you can all volunteer to be part of our committee. Our today is Future Forward, advocating clean energy for a sustainable world. We are fortunate to hear valuable insight from our guest speaker for today. He is the president and COO of First Holdings Corporation, one of the largest industrial conglomerates in the Philippines, and is part of the Lopez Group of companies. He is also the president and COO of Corporation and the president of First Philippine Industrial Park. He was appointed as the vice chairman CEO of Energy Development Corporation on July 1, 2023. He PH in 1997, was assigned the CEO of FGen to lead its $1.4 billion fundraising for the 1,500 megawatt Santa Rita and San gas-fired power plant. He completed his Master of Management degree at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management in 1990, and his Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management from the Ateneo de Manila University in 1985. Please join me in warmly welcoming our guest today, Mr. Francis Gael Puno.
Can everybody hear me, or is it easier? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, good afternoon, and it's an honor to speak in front of many familiar faces in this eighth general membership meeting. Thrilled to be here today, and I want to thank you for inviting me to speak. When preparing for this, I wanted to make it a bit more of a nuance, providing you new insights of how of the Philippine power industry today. So let me just. So just to introduce myself, I'm Giles Puno, president of Philippine Holdings and First Gen. First Gen is the power generating company of the Lopez Group. As a leading independent power producer, we are the largest producer of electricity, clean natural gas, as well as from renewable energy. In 2023, we produced about 8,000 gigawatt-hours of renewable energy, primary geothermal, comprising 30% of the total RE production in the country. Our investment program currently stands at about $2 billion, with more than 70% of that allocated to renewable energy projects, geothermal, as well as more recently in hydro with the acquisition of the Kaseknan power plant. The balance funding our investment in LNG. In 2020, this was during COVID, we crafted our mission and crafted it to say to forge collaborative pathways towards a decarbonized and regenerative future. And this mission cuts across the business groups, all of the business investments of FH. Our pursuit of and renewable, dependable is complemented by our group's power investments in real estate, manufacturing, and construction with common objective to contribute towards societal progress. I'd like to begin my presentation with a metaphor that illustrates the transformation we have witnessed and continue to experience in our business environment through this. It's the metaphor of the ships. This metaphor originated in history when Spanish leaders who were in Mexico ordered their ships to be burned upon arrival in the land. This was to motivate their troops and signal their unwavering dedication to forge ahead with their men. By burning the ships, there was no turning back, no retreat. The ships' lives are past. They represent the status quo and the traditional strategies and practices that has served us well through the years. When we burn the ships, we make an unwavering commitment to consciously adapt and change our goals, we change our dreams, and change our vision for a better future. In today's business environment, the tried and tested ways of doing things are no longer adequate to navigate the turbulent seas of change. Evolving markets, inconsistent government policies, and disruptive technologies have unleashed unpredictable, unprecedented challenges that can also be seen as opportunities. Consumer preferences evolve at a breakneck pace. Globalization has connected us in ways that we could have never imagined. Most notably, however, while these changes are happening, we are also witnessing the degradation of our environment, the loss of biodiversity, and the damaging effects of anthropogenic or man-made climate change. And so we must choose whether to cling to the past or to our burning ships, or to embrace the opportunities that arise from a transforming world. With all these changes, the latter, I would argue, is the clear choice. In First Gen and FPH, we are committed by leading by example. In 2016, we had one of our burn the ships moments when we rejected coal investments. This was 3 years after Super Typhoon Yolanda hit our country with significant devastation, and a year after the Paris Climate Summit at COP21. It was way before the country's coal moratorium, when the coal moratorium was announced. We stand even up to today as a unique, as a major Philippine conglomerate not invested in coal. Today, we find ourselves at new crossroads as the energy landscape continues to evolve. Power demand continues to grow with urbanization and economic progress. At the same time, there is an even stronger clamor to shift away from fossil fuels in favor of green energy solutions aligned with global sustainability goals. I'm happy to report that the narrative across business groups today are aligned in favor of these sustainable solutions. In light of this, the DOE Philippine Energy Plan provides a reasonably clear direction on what needs to be done. It calls for a transition towards more sustainable and resilient energy sources based on the latest 2023 clean energy scenario. The plan targets a larger mix of natural gas and renewables with 35% renewable energy share by 2030 and as much as 50% by 2040. This is from the current 22% share of renewables today. So we must ask ourselves, what course of action do we chart for ourselves? What do we leave behind by burning the old ships? What are the bold steps needed to build a sustainable energy future? I will focus my presentation today on one key area of interest, and that is energy security. Energy security, the need for baseload plants, and how we reduce our fossil fuel dependency. There are growing concerns being voiced out over the sufficiency of supply to meet growing power demand. In the first half of the year, we faced a challenging power situation. 284 hours or 12 days of yellow alerts and 80 hours or 3 days of red alerts. When I was preparing for this, our guy is saying it's actually worse because when it wasn't as if it was yellow alert for 24 hours straight. So you can imagine that it was a prolonged days of when we would have hours of either yellow or red alert. So for those unfamiliar, yellow and red alerts serve as an indicator of the power reserve levels, with yellow signaling low reserves and red indicating a shortage that could lead to what they call load shedding in certain areas. During the summer, I'm sure you can attest to this, we all uncomfortably felt that extreme temperatures where the heat index reached an unbearable 42 to as high as 53 degrees Celsius. With this 53 degrees Celsius happened just last April 28 in Zambales. The effect of the intense heat drastically increased power demand in Luzon, reaching a peak of 14,016 megawatts. That was on April 24, 2024. For 4/24/2024. This was a significant increase of close to 12% for that day, or 1,400 megawatts from the usual 12,550 megawatts peak, which was July of the previous year. This was unprecedented compared to what we usually see as about 500 to 600 megawatts of growth per year. So it was really a multiple of what we saw and what we experienced over the last 5 years. And what about the years ahead? Electricity demand is likely not going to slow down, with potentially hotter temperatures and increased economic activity ahead. UN Secretary General Guterres refers to this as the era of global boiling. Information from the DOE shows that there is roughly about 18,000 megawatts of dependable capacity in Luzon, which should be more than capable to meet the 14,000 megawatt peak load. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we strengthen the power supply situation moving ahead? In 2023, the country had about 28,000 megawatts of installed capacity, generating about close to 120 gigawatt hours of electricity. Around 44% of total capacity came from coal-fired plants that generated 62% of total electricity produced, given their relatively base load operation. 13% of the capacity was from natural gas, ourselves included, generating about 14% of total electricity. Renewables accounted for only about 30% of the installed installed capacity, generating about 22% of output. The country's electricity is clearly heavily reliant on imported coal, and this is coming mainly from Indonesia. In 2023, coal imports rose to 35 million tons. So I asked our analysts, okay, roughly how much is 35 million tons? That's over 200 billion pesos. And so I always say there is some Indonesian supplier that's getting about 200 billion pesos of our hard currency every year and growing. Unfortunately, an Indonesian coal export ban had happened previously in January of 2022, causing havoc with a drastic spike in coal prices, leading to higher power costs. Again, this might even happen in the future. In the mid-90s, when at least I was starting my career, coal only made up about 500 megawatts of the grid, representing 7% of the Philippines' installed capacity. In terms of electricity generated, it also produced about 2,000 gigawatt hours then, or 70% of total electricity production. So we came from 7%. But in the span of 3 decades, the country's reliance on coal increased from 7% of supply to 44% of installed capacity. So right now we have about 12,400 megawatts of coal. From 7% of generation to 62% of total electricity generated, close to 74,000 gigawatt hours. Current pressures to decarbonize create a daunting challenge to bring the number back down to where it started, or maybe even zero in the future. And that's going to be an extremely daunting task. These coal plants serve their purpose when we were addressing energy security issues of the past, but have now become part of the problem due to reliability issues and aging. An aging fleet of power plants is contributing to the yellow and red alerts. The yellow and red alerts we experienced during this summer. Many coal plants in Luzon are 25 years and older. And even our gas fleet is 22 years and older. This has all contributed to unreliable supply. It is also worth noting that certain policies and regulations have created a rather unattractive conditions that contribute to the underinvestment in capacity. So when I talk about this, it's not that companies are unwilling to make investments. There are many companies, including ourselves, that are willing to make massive investments in additional baseload capacity. But let me give some of these sort of examples of how the industry is going through a bit of periods of issues with respect to how we develop new power plants. The first is that price caps send wrong signals, especially if you want to attract new investments. So let's revisit the red and yellow alerts we discussed earlier. Currently, when spot market prices trades at over 9 pesos per kilowatt hour for over 3 days, market intervention occurs, imposing a price cap of 6 pesos and 24 centavos per kilowatt hour. Take note that this price cap was set in June of 2021 and has not been adjusted since. So depending on the price of fuel, even if you were serving what was needed at the time, your margins may likely get squeezed unfairly at a time when you are addressing a serious need. Ironically, even if we experience more red and yellow alerts this year compared to last, the average spot market prices were still lower due to imposed interventions. This is because there have been more instances of price caps being imposed this year. And while price caps aim to control demand and stabilize the market, they clearly dampen the clear signals needed to promote new investments to come in. I'll bring it home. At First Gen, our very own 414 megawatt San Gabriel gas plant was affected by the caps after its power supply agreement with Meralco expired in February. The San Gabriel plant is currently running on what we call full merchant basis, meaning it is dependent on WESM prices. So far, so good for the first half of the year, as it generated even higher revenues compared to the previous year when it was still contracted. But the interventions prevented San Gabriel from earning additional cushion for the second half of the year, where typically prices are softer because of cooler weather conditions. So essentially, we are at the mercy not only of the market, but of the regulators intervening to cushion the blow to the consumers. I'm highlighting this because if we need additional capacity to be built, why would anyone build if the signals being sent are unattractive? In the case of First Gen, we are in fact ready to proceed with an additional 600 megawatt Santa Maria expansion. That would be the most modern technology of its kind in the country. But under current circumstances, it will be difficult for us to defend the investment thesis with our board. It will be no different, I suspect, for other players. The second point is offtake support and commerciality is lacking for critical LNG infrastructure. As mentioned, the Philippine Energy Plan is moving in the right direction by promoting more renewable energy, complemented by cleaner and flexible natural gas technology as a bridge fuel to enable growth in renewables. Unfortunately, the supply of Malampaya natural gas is depleting, which requires us to procure imported LNG to support the country's clean energy future. I'd like to point out that the completion of our First Gen LNG terminal early this year could not have come at a more critical time, given the red and yellow alerts experienced in the summer. We are pleased to report that our efforts helped avert a potentially serious power crisis, as we are now blending Malampaya gas with LNG to meet the full requirements of our power plants. Without the LNG terminal, the country could have faced a more serious supply crisis. Importing LNG is not easy though, as the Philippines is in competition with other countries. When procuring LNG today, there is difficulty to the competing demands from other countries in Asia as well as Europe. In nations like Germany and other European countries, the role of government is paramount in providing offtake assurance and credit support to underpin large and critical project investments such as LNG terminals, including, which is more costly, the LNG molecules. In contrast, the Philippines lacks the assurances for LNG supply, as purchases are currently done on a spot basis with no guarantees for long-term volume. This creates a challenging environment for LNG infrastructure to thrive. The financial commitments of importing LNG supply are substantial and cannot be borne by a single entity like FirstGen without back-to-back offtake assurance. Guaranteed term offtake agreements for LNG supply can significantly enhance price stability, allowing power generators to secure more favorable long-term contracts and pricing that should be beneficial for end consumers. Third, unattractive CSP terms shift more risk to generators. The competitive selection process, or the CSP, of private distribution utilities have become less commercially attractive, raising concerns from generators over financial predictability and returns. Power investments require significant capital. If we were to invest in Santa Maria, for example, that 600 megawatt plant will probably cost us about $900 million. So it requires significant capital and long-term commitments, and the lack of assured returns adds to the challenges. And on the CSP, here are what we consider some of the onerous terms. Fixed peso pricing for 15 years. While this arrangement benefits consumers by providing stable and predictable energy costs, it imposes a significant burden on energy producers. A fixed rate over such a long period does not account for inflation changes in operational, maintenance, and financing costs, which can severely impact an energy project's financial viability. This fixed pricing may actually increase prices today, as generators will try to price in that uncertainty into the fixed priced offer. Replacement power. Energy contracts often include clauses for replacement power, which used to be risk borne by the off-taker. If a generator cannot fulfill its operational commitment, it must provide alternative power sources like from WESM, thus being required to manage replacement power under conditions where demand is high and supply is lacking may add another layer of financial strain. In addition, the regulators have unreasonably reduced the outage allowances allowed for power plants to the extent that replacement power will likely kick in. I'll set another example. When we went through the CSP with Meralco, when we built San Gabriel, we had 2 failed biddings, and then eventually it was awarded to us. When we had it cleared with the regulators, not only did they reduce the price arbitrarily, even if we went through a competitive bidding, but they also reduced the outage allowance. So when the standard outage allowance for power plants is roughly about 45 days and on years where there's a minor outage, and 60 days on years where there's a major outage. But the regulators came up with some formula to say you're only allowed 20.2 days of outage. So clearly, an onerous provision. To put the financial exposure in perspective, gas plants under contract do not profit from fuel directly, and fuel constitutes 80% of our operational cost. So margins may disappear with replacement power provisions. Another, no minimum dispatch guarantees and carve-out provisions. Current contracts often contain carve-out clauses that exclude guaranteed dispatch or minimum operational thresholds. For power plants in particular, for example, if you look at San Gabriel, a 400 megawatt plant, the minimum stable load of San Gabriel is roughly about 250 megawatts. Otherwise, it has to shut down. It cannot operate. For the 250 megawatts Santa Rita plants, the minimum stable load is 160 megawatts. But when the rules of the term say, I am not going to guarantee you dispatch, how do you plan for your operational simply for the next day? So without dispatch uncertainty, the generators cannot assure its fuel suppliers that it can accept the scheduled delivery of fuel for the power plants as well. This exposes the generators with additional financial burden. Yet another issue that compounds the problem of energy security. Lastly, and I can go on and on, so I limited myself to 4. Residential customers. We talk about all of you are here residential customers and also wholesale customers. Their choice is severely delayed. Consumer demand for sustainable energy is reshaping the market. Our own customers are requiring us to provide renewable energy and clean energy. Customers are increasingly seeking this to be cleaner, more affordable, with greater control over their energy sources. However, regulatory barriers remain, preventing full consumer choice in electricity supply sector. Here, we have the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, right? Aimed to deregulate power sector and allow for consumers' choice. But 23 years later, household level customers still can't choose their electricity supply, unlike large users. Enabling retail competition open access to residential customers could significantly lower power costs and boost demand for clean energy, accelerating the country's transition to renewable energy. As part of the law, this is part of the law that still remains to be operationalized 23 years later. So I always say large users get a great deal because we're all, as suppliers, competing for their business. But the small users have no choice except to pay for the power of the incumbent utility. Again, I could elaborate more, but I believe I believe the point is clear. In essence, encouraging investments without sacrificing consumer welfare requires a delicate balance. Contract terms that pass on so much risk to the power plant developers could backfire down the road, as it will make investing in new necessary capacities less attractive from a risk and reward perspective. In turn, consumer welfare also suffers in the long run. To conclude, with all of this, let us return to the metaphor of burning the ships, a powerful reminder of our commitment to transform our industry towards a more future-ready state. As we burn our ships to prevent returning to what we know, we must now settle in this new landscape to focus on the importance of achieving energy security. This journey not only requires a coherent strategy supported by robust policies, but more importantly, it should focus on the effective implementation of these policies. At the heart of this transformation is our mission at FPH and FirstGen to decarbonize our country's energy future. But achieving this goal involves, again, a delicate balance, one that ensures consumer welfare while also incentivizing investors to support a more sustainable green future. Let us create an environment where investments in energy are made to be attractive. This is not a mission we can accomplish on our own. It demands extensive collaboration with multiple stakeholders across the energy ecosystem. Together, we can build a future where the Philippines is powered by clean, reliable, and affordable energy, advancing both consumer interests and long-term sustainability. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you. Do we work it?
All right. So thank you, Mr. Gauss. We do appreciate the expertise and the valuable insights that you shared from the perspective of the generators. I'd say that the onerous provisions are indeed insightful. So to continue the conversation, please allow me to call on stage Dr. Rufo Mendoza, Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration of the De La Salle University, to moderate our panel. How about a big hand for Dr. Mendoza?
Thank you very much, Darwin. A pleasant afternoon to everyone. Yeah, I'm Rufo Mendoza. I'm with De La Salle University until end of this month. But basically, I am a professor. I am an academic and scholar. I was a full-time professor and chair of Finance and Accounting Department at the Asian Institute of Management. I also taught at the Ateneo School of Government, and I'm currently teaching in the graduate school of the University of the Philippines in Los Baños. So when I was talking to Ricky earlier, he asked me, what color do you wear when you watch UAAP? So I told him, whoever gives me the ticket. Okay, so by the way, I am the author of the book, which is being shown outside. It's sustainability, understanding sustainability in business. This is copyright 2024 and published by SGB Foundation. I'm giving away 5 copies here this afternoon. Okay, so thank you very much, Gail, for such an informative presentation. We are talking about energy and power because we know that energy is at the heart of sustainable development goals of the United Nations. We know that access to energy is at the heart of development. In fact, SDG 7 aims to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Energy is not just a commodity. It is a foundational element of economic development as well as societal and human advancement and well-being. I will be asking Giles 3 questions only here. Although as a graduate professor, I can ask him so many questions. Given the very rich presentation, rich data in his presentation, I'll start with a very friendly question, a conceptual question. Giles, is renewable energy synonymous with clean energy?
Well, yes. So that's as simple as it gets.
So we can use the term interchangeably. Renewable energy is synonymous with clean energy. Giles made use of metaphor, okay, focusing on transformation regarding burning ships to show that tried and tested ways of doing things are no longer adequate. I'd like to ask Giles, what leadership attributes, you being the top person in the organization, were necessary for you to be able to spearhead clean energy? You're talking about your clear choice, you're leading by example. So what are these leadership attributes being the top person in the organization?
Well, first and foremost, I remember going through a survey, and they said, okay, what is the key attribute of a good leader? It's that they have to be forward-looking. But more than that, in the context of the company that I work for example, there are basic elements of what makes it very easy to go to work every day. The first one is a common mission. And I described that in my presentation earlier. So that was key. The second one is we have what we call, you have a strategy, but are you prepared to understand what key capabilities are needed to succeed? And so in our case, we have 4 or 5 capabilities that we think we need to be best at compared to our competitors. The third element is culture, right? You have all those capabilities, but you have a poor culture. It doesn't work. And so in First Holdings Group, in First Gen Group, we have what we call the best culture. It's BEST, standing for certain words. Build trust, inspire change, and all of these things that really are required to make sure that we thrive together.
So how do you embed this to people and the whole organization?
Yeah. One of my favorite books is Good to Great. So all you have to do is look at that book and say, okay, what were the key elements of Good to Great? It was a mission vision. Okay. It was persistence. You create your own luck. It was level 5, what they call, what term as level 5 leadership. Leadership that is quite humble, but also quite daring to make changes when necessary. So a lot of that, it's being clear about what your flywheel is. No? The famous book on flywheels is when the author was invited by Jeff Bezos, when Jeff Bezos was losing a lot of money during his early Amazon years. He invited the author of Good to Great, and immediately they talked about the flywheel. And so if you Google, you'll say Amazon flywheel, you'll see the drawing of Jeff Bezos to say, okay, this is what Amazon is. Up to today, that still stands.
Okay. So we say great by choice. That's the next volume. Okay, last question for Giles, because we will open the floor to our participants here, to our members. So last question. We know that energy provides economic opportunities. It enables better access to education and healthcare. And Giles mentioned about price caps, supply and demand, regulators and market players, guaranteed terms of agreement, residential customer choices, and the desire for a future-ready landscape. I'd like to ask Giles for a clearer and more specific paradigm shifts that the government should initiate or adopt related to how power is produced or extracted, and if you can, how power is consumed. So what paradigm shifts? If you were to in front of a legislator or maybe the country's president, what paradigm shifts? Okay.
Well, if you look at the President's State of the Nation, I couldn't ask for a more better report as far as the move towards cleaner and renewable energy. So that's not even the issue. The issue, I think that narrative, as I described in my presentation, is common already amongst all the conglomerates today. If you look at the word sustainable, every integrated report of every major conglomerate today will have sustainable written all over it. But it's more a question of really how you execute, how you implement sound regulation or sound policies to make sure that, of course, some of these decisions will be painful for the consumers, but is having power more important than no power at all? And so a lot of that will translate to our ability to create aligned incentives to make sure that we're moving in the right direction together. And we're more than happy to work with all the stakeholders in this front. But also, that's the reason why I say consumer choice should speak. We call consumers our superpower. They have the superpower to choose. And so for us, we're saying, okay, then give them that right to choose.
Yeah. Giles, if I got it right, you mentioned earlier that there's a law, I think it's EPIRA, which you were saying that it is not fully or properly implemented. Is that right?
Yeah, well, EPIRA was passed in 2001. And 23 years later, it has not yet been fully implemented. So the law is there, but now we're even talking about EPIRA amendments, which is okay. You can always refine a law, but you got to implement the law to begin with. Same thing in the case of the RE law. The RE law was passed 16 years ago, but up to today, it's only partially implemented. So we pass laws, but we don't implement them. And so that becomes problematic in terms of assuring investors of a very a fair environment when they come into the country, because there's a lot of capital that's ready to invest in the country. Just to take our point, in the case of First Gen, we have KKR as one of our investors, and KKR did a tender offer in the Philippine Stock Exchange twice. And so right now, they're an investor in First Gen without any shareholders agreement. That's a unique situation. Of course, in our subsidiary EDC, we have GIC of Singapore as well as Macquarie Infrastructure. And these are really private equity, private capital that's ready to infuse more capital into the system under the right circumstances.
Okay, so these are very interesting topics. And at this point, I would like to open the floor to our members, to our participants. You may raise your clarifications or questions now. Please state your name and the company where you are affiliated.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Diego. I'm affiliated with HMS Credit and Finance Company, Inc. Giles, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that the customer choice is not yet fully granted or fully allowed. And I wanted to understand what you think is preventing customers from having that complete access, because in our COA, Retail Competitive Open Access, you need to have a bill of at least 1 million pesos to qualify for our COA. And for GEOP, Green Energy Option Program, you need a bill of at least 200,000 a month in order to qualify for GEOP. But if you were to avail of our COA or GEOP, you can only go through retail energy suppliers. And there are about 23, 24 RES suppliers, most of whom are Aboitiz-owned, Ayala-owned, Lopez-owned big conglomerates. So who is, and when you do GEOP, if you choose to go through GEOP, you can't just get a portion of your 200,000 peso bill as renewable. You have to find an RES supplier, an RES, who can supply you 100% green energy.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So
the GEOP,
yes,
again, was introduced as a way to accelerate customer choice. It was already there in EPIRA.
right.
But for whatever reason, and your guess is as good as mine, it was very slow in being, continues to be very slow in implementation. Now, I'm not pointing at any fingers, but typically, if you look at what happens in other countries, it's usually slowed down by incumbent players. That's the case study overseas. I'm not going to point anyone here, but I think your guess is as good as mine. But having said that, the law is pretty clear. It's clear. It's not even pretty clear. It's clear. And what we have to do is really push our lawmakers and the regulators and the Department of Energy to say, implement this, because it's going to be unfair on me as a residential customer, okay, when I don't have a choice, when I'm
Right.
supposed to be under law given a choice. So in that case, I can sell to Toti as a residential customer rather than Toti as an Ayala Land customer.
Right.
Say, okay, where do you want to buy your power from? Is it going to be from ASEN? Is it going to be from Aboitiz? Or is it going to be for First Gen? At least they're given a choice. No?
So
And
you're-
I would argue that that you will get a better deal if you shop it around. No?
And you think that the regulators or the regulators or the lawmakers would listen to consumers who
They
try
do. They do, because consumers are the voters. And so by definition, they
They
should.
should.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the next question from the audience? Yeah, please.
Hello, everyone. I guess. Okay, it's good to know that First Holdings never even considered coal. There are some proponents of nuclear power. What are your thoughts? And what are the what do you think will be the landscape, if any, for nuclear?
Yeah. Honestly, in the case of First, and we even looked at repowering the existing nuclear many years ago, and there were proponents that said that you could do it. The only problem is when you go there, I'm not sure you can really do it. It's a state of disrepair. Having said that, when you look at newer technologies of nuclear, SMRs, for example, small modular, there could be a situation where that is possible. The problem now is that power supply is a key element to that. SMRs are not even really yet quite proven. But at some stage, nuclear can be part of the solution. And that's why when you look at certain studies, they say grow solar, grow wind, and grow not other RE. They say grow other non-fossils, right? Which means RE, in that study, I'm sure it was referring to nuclear. And so when you look at the math, and if we needed to accelerate our downward curve towards net zero, nuclear will form part of that solution. But it has to be proven. The only thing is that nuclear in certain markets have a very good track record, in other markets have a very poor track record. So it's one of those where we need to make sure we implement it properly. And the question for us always is, where will you locate it? Will you locate it right beside Toti's house? Or will you locate it is there a site out there where you'll be able to find a good location for nuclear solutions? That's yet another part of the challenge. I was listening to a podcast on data centers, for example, with artificial intelligence. When you do a search in artificial intelligence, the power requirement of a AI search compared to a normal Google search is 10 times. And so when you want to build all of these data centers, okay, the tendency now is, okay, it's not just about building it in a piece of land. It's a question of where will the power be coming from? And by definition, in the country like the Philippines, we're notoriously problematic with respect to transmission line interconnection. So the development of that will mean that we need more power, okay? We need more transmission lines. We need to electrify all the users, including one of the biggest emission producer is transport. So you need to electrify transport as well. But what happens is it becomes very challenging to find a way to do that. And so like I said, these are challenges, but they're also opportunities.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so we have this one first and then we'll have that.
Giles, I've been observing that you're raising sentiment about non-implementation or non-execution of the IPIRA law. So just out of ignorance, if that law is fully implemented, would that benefit the power producer or the
I think it will
consumer?
benefit the consumers more. No, for example, I spent some time looking at the investment in New Zealand. When you look at the TV ads, there's a lot of power suppliers doing television advertising because they want your business. And if you look at the law in New Zealand, I think the movement from one supplier to the next by law has to be within 48 hours. So if you decided to leave your incumbent utility and you decided to go to first gen, which I hope sometime in the future we could, then within 24 hours, your service is already served by first gen. But the incumbent utility, the electricity still goes through the wires of the incumbent utility. They're still paid as a distribution utility, but they will no longer paid for their services as a generator.
Follow-up question, Giles. So how do you propose that the government or the lawmakers would actually implement that? Is there a need for like a group, a lobbyist group or whatever to like have it?
Yeah, there has to be lobbying. Fortunately, I sent a text the other day. Senator Gatchalian, who actually no longer heads the Energy Committee in the Senate, but was previously the Energy Committee head, really pushed the DOE as well as the regulators accelerate retail competition open access. So there are supporters in the Senate, and there probably are also supporters in the House of Congress. So, I think it's just a question of really pushing.
Thank you. Can we have the next one, please?
Hello, I'm Mignon Ramos. I'm with the Phoenix board. And my question has to do with the distribution grid. Are there investors? Is there such a thing as clean distribution? And who's overseeing all of that as far as distribution is concerned?
Well, the distribution business is a natural monopoly. So they have a franchise. So Meralco is a franchise. The other distribution utilities in Davao, Cebu, Panay, they're all under a franchise. And there also is our electric cooperatives as well as other private distribution utilities. So it's generally regulated by the Energy Regulatory ERC and as well as the DOE.
So they are looking out that the distribution grid will grow as much as the power requirements.
Yes, except that the challenge with transmission usually is right of way. Because a power plant is located there, and especially when you want to build out RE is very site specific. Just because you have a piece of land there doesn't mean that it's good for wind or hydro or solar. So you really have to go to specific. The challenge there is that when you look at solar or wind, in a year they'll produce. Solar you're lucky to hit 20% capacity factor for the year. And so you have to pay for that whole transmission line, which costs the same. So actually, for geothermal, it should be a no-brainer. And yet we still have problems. So when you build the geothermal, the utility the transmission line company or NGCP should immediately support it because geothermal will allow you to be able to fully recover your cost faster because of the kilowatt hour production coming from that geothermal facility, unlike in the case of more intermittent sources like wind and solar.
My worry really is that nobody's looking at whether the existing franchise holders are investing enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, in fairness, the existing franchise holders are investing quite a bit in the distribution system. Okay. It's a problem in the US, in fact. So we have another business called, it's First Philec. We manufacture distribution transformers. And when we looked at the average age of a transformer in the US, it's almost 40 years old in the distribution end. Whereas here in the Meralco franchise area, it's a little over 20 years.
So our distribution utility transformers age is even younger than many of the utilities in
And
the
that's
US.
looking back. How about looking forward? So
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
are the real words.
Agree,
Thank
agree.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Can we have the next one? Yeah. Judith?
Good afternoon, guys. Judith Lopez, past president of Phoenix. A number of challenges you mentioned earlier that makes investment on the sector unattractive most likely will be able to be addressed by the government,
Yes.
regulators. And I assume all of these issues have been discussed with the government repeatedly. And it seems no actions have been done.
Yeah.
What seems to be what's restraining the government to address immediately those concerns or
Yeah.
some of the concerns
Yes.
so that the industry becomes attractive to foreign
Yes.
investors? Thank
You know, from my presentation, you probably can sense a level of frustration.
Yeah.
I always say the level of frustration is coming from the fact that I've been with the company for 27 years. And I always say that we could have done more. And we'd like to do more for the country. So that's the level of frustration. And I don't see why these things cannot be implemented sooner than later. Because, you know, otherwise we suffer our own dragging of our feet. When actually there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of investors, there's a lot of interest. We have an industrial park in Batangas where we have first-rate locators, and you know, you see them expanding. So I'm still an optimist about the future, but I get frustrated with the fact that things move slower than it should. But really, you're right. Everybody should be talking to their congressman or woman.
Okay. Next, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Ana Gonzalez, Ayala Land. I don't know if this is a question for the generator or the distributor, but I noticed, well, what do you think of decentralized power generation? So for example, in Germany, in some parts, there are farmers or farmlands which have their windmills. Yeah. But who in the Philippines is something like that possible?
It's possible. It's possible.
And has your company
It's
looked
possible.
at that?
In fact, that's what a solar facility does
That's right.
when you build on your rooftop. So I've seen bills where they Meralco pays them. I've seen bills where it's zero. Okay, it's primarily a warehouse. They don't have a lot of usage, and they have people who go there for work, but it's primarily for storage, so it's not very energy intensive. But they have a full rooftop, so essentially they're a net seller to the grid.
Yeah, that net metering.
Yeah, they're net metering. So
right.
so that's already existing today. And so yeah, I mean, for me, it's a bit of a crime today if you don't put rooftop solar. I have a rooftop solar in my home. I've shifted to an electric vehicle. So I'm trying to figure out whether or not it actually makes sense. I saw a study where, you know, there's always saying how do you compare it versus an ICE? And and that study said that within 2 years it pays back right away the cost of fuel. So yeah, the numbers will work, especially today when you go all over. People are selling electric vehicles to you anyway. No? So and the prices are going down. So that's I think I'm hopeful.
Okay, but who should be leading that? Should it be a company like yours? Should it be the distributor? Or, for example, if the investment is too high, like I'm a homeowner.
Yeah, so
I don't wanna
you should
spend
we are very involved in that. And when we go to, for example, Jollibee, right? Jollibee is a big customer of ours. And they decided that they wanted to focus a lot more on ESG to reduce their, so given they're a larger global company, we have filled their rooftops to the max. And they're also considering transport of their vehicles shifting to electric. their lorries, the delivery equipment. So what's happening is, what it probably did is they started measuring their carbon intensity and said, okay, how do I move from here to here in the next 3 to 5 years? And part of that is that way. And what we do is we give them the flexibility. Do you want us to make the investment and lease long term? Or we have other customers says, I just want to buy from you.
That's right.
And so we have other customers who just buys directly from us, and we're happy with that. We also have other customers who we lease. No, now the nice thing about the conversation today, customers by definition will become more sticky in the energy business. Previously, when you're with Meralco or with your incumbent telecoms or not, the connection to the utility is more like a complaint center, right? It's always a complaint. Brown out, when will it come back? No? But today, we have very interesting conversation with our customers. Of course, they want steady supply. They want the lowest price. But the third is, do you want it from renewables? Do you want it from clean? Do you want it from, are you indifferent? Do you want it cheapest, coal? Or do you want, the fourth one is, can we help you reduce your power bill? And by definition, what we'll do is we'll sensorize all of your load and figure out, capture data and figure out how to optimize your energy requirements. So that's dollars and pesos saved. And then the fifth one is interesting. Many of our customers are saying, can you help us with this journey towards net zero? I find that very refreshing, because they're saying, we used to not hear now we do.
Great. That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, we will have the last two questions. So can we have there?
I'm Briggs Marin. I'm a Phoenix member. I'm just wondering, because you are in this industry, if there is a sort of a dialogue or an engagement with the government looking at the capacity needed for power, given that you see all of this reclamation, the MOA, and all of this buildings that's being built up. That's 1,000 of hectares that's being built in the MOA area. And at the same time, we're building subways and MRTs. So just imagine the power generation requirement of all of this new infrastructure that is being built. So, and how do we address it? Because building a power generation infrastructure takes time. And what is the prospect of having subnuclear stations being built, like the one that's being built in Taiwan? This is most modern, safest infrastructure for power for the country.
Yes to all your questions. There's going to be a lot more need for capacity. And so part of it really is, how do you incentivize investment to come in? Yeah. And as I said, there's a bit of additional dialogue needed to address. Nuclear, as mentioned earlier, yes, it could be part of the solution as well. So,
and fastest.
And yeah.
Okay. How do we address also, because there are islands like Mindoro, for example, where they're paying 22 kilowatt per kilowatt hour. And these are islands with big potential for growth. But if you notice, there's not even a mall there because of the
I think
cost of power.
Part of it, historically, they've had problematic management in some of these utilities. There are certain utilities that are notoriously delayed in their payment. They have high wastage and all that. But that's more an exception to the rule. More and more are stepping up to the plate to improve their efficiency.
Okay, so we conclude. Last one. Okay. Yes, please.
I'm glad the questions, because it means you were listening.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. I'm Catherine Gomez from PwC. So thank you once again for the very interesting and enlightening presentation, Mr. Puno. I'm sure a lot of us here are with you in terms of looking forward to a regenerative and decarbonized future. So wanting to learn from your successor to transitioning to a lower carbon business operations, just wondering what were the pain points or the challenges that you encountered when you started burning your ships, and how did you overcome these?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, I think when we announced that we were not doing coal, our competitors were smiling and gleeful that we were not. There was one less competitor for the coal assets. Truth be told, we looked at coal, but for whatever reason, when we were doing due diligence in these coal assets, it was always a little bit more heavy. We were heavy-hearted about it, no? And then finally, I remember even during our corporate planning, senior executive corporate planning, our chairman emeritus has since passed away. We always have a section in our planning on coal, even if we were not a coal developer. And he said to me, "Why are you still discussing coal today?" You know, and this was, I mean, this is a true story, you know. And actually, there I had to defend this. That the reason why we have to is that that's also what our competitors are doing. We just have to understand the lay of the land. Yeah. But it was very clear that the direction to move away from any consideration of coal was driven by you know, the beliefs inside the company, but actually even more so. That's why I mentioned Yolanda. Super Typhoon Yolanda affected our own geothermal power plants severely. And when we came there, we were bringing in goods. The people were so devastated. And you see the impact of climate change. We had a signing recently with Holcim on electric power. And the country manager there's a new country manager. The one leaving will now be based back in Switzerland, but he's going to be the chief sustainability officer of Holcim. But when we were exchanging stories about it, he said there were two experiences I saw in the Philippines. I had a friend who had this parcel of land. I think he mentioned Tawi-Tawi, and one day when I went there, it was already you see sea level rise affecting them. So he said it was very clear in his mind that the impact of climate change is already affecting severely a country like the Philippines. And so the responsible thing to do was to shift towards renewable energy, although they have some legacy contracts that are still with coal. But more and more, as those expire, they'll shift to renewable energy. It's a very difficult. The moment we made that announcement, and our chairman made that announcement, the night before, I wish I had kept the paper. I put down all of the names of the companies that were in coal, and all of the names of the companies that will be an outlier, including ourselves. And amongst the conglomerates, we were the only one in the other end, except for smaller developers. So we were an outlier for a long time. But I'm happy to say, like I said in my word, that today, that's no longer the narrative. The narrative is much more common today. In fact, the challenge now is how do you differentiate a first-gen story versus another story, another company? Because that story was, when they talk, it's like I look at them and say, wow, that's like our speech from some time back. I mean, it's amazing, right? And yet, okay, this is the joke. They still have coal in their portfolio, but they're very clear about the fact that they're a sustainable company. So fine. The narrative is there. We just have to, but it's just a little bit, you know, again, that's why I was saying it was truly a burn the ships moment for us.
Okay, so I think Gans will agree with me that managing this challenge of burning the ship is one of the attributes of leadership. Okay, so we end this session by saying that clean energy is a broad topic for discussion. It covers access to people's access to energy, security of energy sources. We're talking here about carbon emissions, reducing deadly air pollution, and most importantly, our own individual contribution to promote and advocate clean energy. So thanks to our members, to our participants for your attention and participation. And thank you very much, Gail, for such a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles and Dr. Rufo, for that engaging conversation. I'm sure everybody would agree if I say that we learned a lot today. So, so another round of applause to our guest speaker and moderator. So before we leave, please allow me to announce the winners of our book and then gift certificates. I'll announce first the five winners of the 5 books, and you can claim it outside. So we have Larry Concepcion, Paulo Azurin, Benny Sullivan, Alvin Helly, and George Chua. You can claim it outside. And then for the gift certificates, we have 10. Hazel Abelia, Maricar Reyes, Cecilio San Pedro, Claudine Del Rosario, Ernesto Pascual, Michelle Chan, Ronald Guseco, Cristina De Leon, Aurora Calanando, and Grace Gurtiza. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this GMM. This meeting is adjourned.